Hey everyone, hope you guys are doing well. Welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be our Matchday 2 draft wildcard. Now, I myself am embarking on a wildcard 5 strategy, but I know a lot of people drafted their teams in Matchday 1 with the sole purpose of targeting Matchday 1. So if you've gone for example, any specific lineup that, let's say, targets, for example, Denmark's fixtures, the Dutch fixtures, for example, obviously in Matchday 2, you've got much tougher fixtures there. So it does make sense, of course, when you're going for this sort of all-in chip strategy with using the Limitless and the wildcard to obviously use another chip in Matchday 2 and another chip in Matchday 3. The way this video is going to work is I'm going to present you guys a wildcard draft using the 100 million limited budget. And then I'm going to show you guys a limitless draft on the sort of limitless budget, obviously, because I think one thing that a lot of people have to consider if they're already embarked on, let's say, this sort of chip strategy route where they use both limitless and the wildcard within Matchday 2 and Matchday 3 is just the general idea of, how strong can you get a team using the 100 million budget on Matchday 2, and how strong can you get a team using the limitless budget on Matchday 3? For example, when you talk about, let's say, Matchday 3, Spain is obviously one of the big teams, I would say, where you probably want to target quite heavily on them. They're not exactly that expensive within the game, whereas obviously your teams like France, England, they're much more expensive, and that's just something to consider. The same with Portugal, but to be fair, with teams like Portugal and Belgium, as we've said many times, they just simply have good fixtures almost all the way throughout the tournament. Anyways, let's get started quickly initially with the Matchday 2 draft wildcard. So with the Matchday 2 draft wildcard, I think the most important thing to mention here is that ultimately you're targeting just Matchday 2. So the way that I've actually created this video is I've had a look at, for example, some of the odds shared by my friend 11ify. So you can find obviously his projections within his website 11ify.com. The link is actually in the description, and he's basically continuously updating his team model based on results from Matchday 1. This will obviously have some small changes from day to day, right? Because right now I'm recording this video after the Spanish group has played. So I just watched Italy versus Albania. That was a terrible game of football, and I'm so glad it's over. I don't know how Chiesa got man of the match, but, that was done. We watched it. And right now, of course, we still have a lot of games and a lot of teams to go. Of course, I'm recording this video because, unfortunately, the Matchday 2 deadline is just around the corner after the final Matchday 1 game. So without further ado, the clean sheet projections right now that I can see, obviously, on 11ify's website is Croatia obviously leading the pack. And this is also simply because a lot of the sort of bookies and even the markets as well have a similar sort of appetite towards Albania. They don't really rate Albania as a team within this tournament, and they're not expecting Albania to do so well. Yes, of course, Albania scored, assisted by DeMarco versus Italy, which was pretty brutal to watch, to be fair. But they still ultimately, within the course of the game, only racked up 0.46 XG. When you look at Scotland as well, Rudiger scored an own goal. So we're not really expecting teams like, for example, Scotland, for example, Albania to do too well. So I think the idea that obviously another team can get a clean sheet versus them is possible. Yes, of course, Croatia conceded 3 goals to Spain, but I don't think we really need to compare Spain to Albania. You know the rest. So clean sheet odds are very good for a team like Croatia. And then obviously there's like this sort of pack in the middle where you have a lot of closeness between teams like Germany, Belgium, Serbia, Czech Republic, Ukraine, and England. And what I would say here is that, I mean, obviously you've got also Austria, Portugal, and Switzerland. But within this pack of teams, what's nice is that when you look at the betting markets too, I think Germany and England tend to be a little bit more rated. And of course, we're going to be including a little bit more of those players within our sort of expanded budget drafts, right? The only thing I'll say about England, of course, is that they just on paper have a tough game. It is Denmark. I think Denmark definitely, if you were to, let's say, sort of list all the teams within the tournament within a bracket, right? Would they be in the top half? Would they be in the bottom half? I think they'd be in the top half. So for me, I think England do have a little bit of a tougher game. So it does make sense to probably cut back in terms of the expenditure when it comes to England. However, it's also tough to find a captaincy within the day that England play. So ultimately, I think you probably still want at least one English player to become a captaincy option in Matchday 2. As far as obviously some of the teams that I think uniquely have a good fixture on Matchday 2, we're talking about teams like Serbia. We're talking about teams like, once again, Ukraine, even though a lot of people started Matchday 1 with Ukrainian players. At the same time, Austria finally have a good fixture here. And then Switzerland, if you haven't been able to target them, for example, previously on Matchday 1, you have a chance once again to target them on Matchday 2. Starting with the defense, though, and after looking at the clean sheet odds, we're looking at players who are quite cheap from the teams that I identified. So from Serbia, we have Pavlovic, effectively someone who should be playing center back, sometimes can play left back for this team. I do think that he's nailed at 4.5 million. You are also kind of spoiled for choice within this position. I think you can argue that you can go for another Croatian player like Pongrasic, who actually played at a 4 million price point and started versus Spain, but I don't think he's necessarily nailed within the system. So to me, the nailed players within Croatia are probably Sutalo and Guardiol. So that's why we've targeted Guardiol at a very expensive price point, but if you look at, for example, some of the positions that he was occupying within the friendlies, and if you look at the positions that he was occupying even within the Spanish game, I mean, you can even argue that he had a great goal scoring position within that match. So I think Guardiola is an awesome pick to go for. I would definitely be incentivized to go double Croatian defense, but as I said, there are some constraints here, and also there might be some doubts about whether Pongrasic can start. I do think Pongrasic is better than Pavlovic if you think that he's nailed, but I don't think that's necessarily the case right now that he is nailed, because obviously you can see different situations where maybe even Sosa can play and things like that. I've still gone for Mittelstadt within this situation here. We still need to be limited by that 100 million budget. So I think Mittelstadt was actually getting within great chances within the match versus Scotland. He was taking a lot of shots, obviously a lot of shots being missed, but just the idea that he gets so involved within great attacking positions is very helpful. He also had a great cross, if you guys remember, for Florian Wirtz, who actually unfortunately skied it above the box as well in the first half of the game. So I think Mittelstadt is still a great pick to go for. Obviously less ball recoveries compared to Rudiger and Tah, but once again, with the sort of price point here, I think it's elite. Fabian Schär is also an option I like a lot. Obviously, Akanji got a lot of ball recoveries more than him, but you're still saving 0.5 million. And I think that obviously when you look at, for example, Akanji, it's not necessarily the case that he's always going to outscore Fabian Schär in ball recoveries per game. There's also 0.5 million difference. So I do like Fabian Schär for the purposes of that. At the same time, we're going with Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, some people will obviously say that Trent Alexander-Arnold is not nailed. So if I'm not, let's say, not going for Pongrasic, who's not nailed, why am I going for Trent? I think Trent is nice because I can at least illustrate this video, before England and Serbia have played. I don't know whether Trent is going to have a good match versus England, versus Serbia rather, but I still can obviously expect that he can do well. And if he doesn't do well, I think the simple answer is that, Kyle Walker is available at 5.5 million. Or if you really want to go for another English defender, you can go for another cheaper English defender. At the same time, of course, if you want to sort of spend additional money, I do think that there is obviously a almost partnership that you can go for, which is something like Cancelo, Pograsic as well from Croatia. But I think the key thing is that the reason why we want to go for one English player at least is that so you can have at least a decent captaincy option when England play. And for me, that's quite significant. That's why I'd rather have Trent, to be honest, than Cancelo. And I do hope that Trent should be able to play well within the Serbia game, which should hopefully mean that he continues to start for England. As I said, I love Guardiola a lot. And then the keepers is actually about saving as much money as possible. Because in my opinion, two teams that actually have really good clean sheet odds are clearly Czech Republic and Ukraine, right? In terms of being able to access these players at cheaper price points. Now, it might be the case that within the Serbian goalkeepers, where I think there's still a little bit of doubt over them, that you can just simply go for, let's say, Milinkovic-Savic, or you can just simply go for Rajkovic as well. So those are your options really when it comes to the Serbian defense. That could also give you a little bit of a price point saving, right? Because if you can go for Rajkovic, that's a huge sort of difference for the Serbian defense and a little bit of access to funds, where you can definitely even upgrade once again Cancelo. So that's something to think about. And obviously in the 4.0 position, let's see what happens with Belgium as well, because you can simply go for a Belgium defender as well. So let's say if you choose to, let's say, go for Milinkovic-Savic as your goalkeeper, if he's the starting goalkeeper for Serbia, you can then simply move into, let's say, a 4.5 defender as well from the Ukrainian team. You can just go for someone like Konoplia. And at the same time, we can still see whether De Kuyper plays well, whether Face plays well, and whether we expect them to continue to start, because obviously Teat and Vertonghen are back in the squad and they're back in full training. As far as the midfield, moving to that position, I think what's worth looking into first is going to be the team goals sort of metrics as well. And the team goals metrics are very interesting for Matchday 2. Still, it's obviously the more dominant teams that we're expecting to do well are Portugal, Germany, Belgium once again. England a little bit worse off because obviously Denmark is a much tougher opponent. And then it's France. And then honestly, it kind of teeters out, right? There's obviously some teams that have, abnormally high goal scoring odds. So for example, Croatia have good goal scoring odds, respective to themselves as a team. Czech Republic, Serbia, Ukraine as well. So obviously you can target teams and players from these sort of teams. Even Austria and Switzerland, I think, definitely count within this sort of feature here, because obviously if you can pick some players for budget price points from these teams within the attacking positions, at least when you're constricted by a 100 million budget, it's not a bad idea at all. So that's why within the sort of midfield position, I've suggested Abisher. Now obviously it's going to look like a little bit of hindsight merchanting, and the reality is that it is, right? I think with the Switzerland lineup, the idea that Shaqiri would be not even starting match day 1 for me was a huge shock. So I thought Shaqiri would play limited minutes. If you've been watching my cheat sheet videos, you'll know that my sentiments on Shaqiri is that he is a little bit aged, and I don't think he's necessarily nailed within the Switzerland team. But for him to not feature in match day 1, I think is very surprising. I haven't really seen too many quotes from the manager as well talking about why Shaqiri was benched necessarily and what that means for his role for the team within the group. But obviously Switzerland have once again a really good fixture. And the fact that Abisher played so well, I really hope that just means that he can play and start again versus Scotland, where he played once again a brilliant game, and hopefully he can repeat his heroics there. But at the bare minimum, the reality is he's a really cheap player, and he's basically your budget enabler for this draft without having to be basically a boring sort of defensive mid who ultimately is just someone that you're looking for with ball recoveries and things like that. So hopefully Abisher is an interesting option within this sort of budgeted format. And then you can kind of go all out with players like Musiala, De Bruyne, Fernandes, and even Kvaratskhelia. The reason why I'm going for Kvaratskhelia is because I think at this price point, you know, with Gundogan outside of the sort of table because you're going for triple Germany anyways, and obviously that's a little bit of a spoiler for the forward position, but if you go for these players, you're going tripled up on Germany. It's quite hard to find a 7 million midfielder who actually has a really good fixture. In my opinion, obviously Mudryk could do well very much in the first day of the group stage. So can Kvaratskhelia, and maybe we can make an assessment then. But still, Georgia actually have a relatively good fixture when it comes to Matchday 2. I still think that obviously when we're looking at these talismans here, you know, Szoboszlai, for example, doing well in Switzerland, despite, for example, Hungary doing not so well in the first half, just illustrates, of course, how important it is when you're involved in all aspects of play. And so obviously I like Kvaratskhelia as a pick. Fernandes, De Bruyne, Musiala, as I said, not really too much to explain here. They're just amazing picks. And going quickly last to the front line, we've gone with Mbappe, Ronaldo, and Havertz. Now, a lot of people are going to find it contentious that I've gone for Mbappe because clearly France are against Netherlands, and then when it comes to, let's say, England's fixture, obviously they've got Denmark as well. In my opinion, obviously we will find out exactly what's going on with Mbappe, right? Whether he's fit enough to play 90 minutes in the first match, or whether obviously he's carrying some sort of knock and he needs to have his minutes managed. Obviously, you can just simply go towards Mbappe or go away from Mbappe into Kane. However, one thing I'll mention about the way the sort of fixtures work in terms of the days that they actually fall upon is that having at least one English player and one French player is very helpful, because when you actually look at the days that, for example, France plays, which is the 21st of June, unfortunately, your other picks are, let's say, you have to kind of look for a Ukrainian pick or a maybe Polish or Austrian pick. So it's actually very tough to kind of find an option within that day. You're definitely not going to go for a Dutch player, I would imagine, because you're probably going to expect that France is going to do a lot better within that game, and overall, that's going to be a tough game. But Mbappe, I think, him and Kane are obviously such elite options, regardless of the quality of the fixture, that they're still very good to pick. And for me, he's still a very strong captaincy contender for the 21st of June. So I think that makes him edge Kane out within my draft structure here. When it comes to obviously that England match day, right? I do think it's obviously between ultimately maybe a Spanish option if you really want to go there, maybe a Serbian option or an English option when it comes to a captaincy option there. We don't have too many Serbian options that we're going to go for, because unfortunately, a lot of the best Serbian options are priced within the forward position, and I still think that you can do better than, let's say, Dusan Tadic and maybe, of course, Mitrovic as well, despite them being key players for their country. At the same time, when it comes to Spain, this is still their toughest fixture, in my opinion. They're obviously a similar quality level opponent to Croatia, and the reality is, if you actually looked back at the Spanish game, they actually conceded so many chances. I think Spain probably have the most undeserved clean sheet at the tournament, and I'm Spanish telling you this right now. So for me, there's no bias. I think we played really poorly when it comes to defense, but at the same time, we were extremely clinical when it came to offense, which is obviously a surprise for Spain. And so that was a very good game, but I still think that potentially some people might be overrating the quality of the Spanish team potentially. We do look like a balanced team. We have some nice players. Yamal obviously played brilliant, but do you really want to go for Spanish players on match day 2? I would say probably not. So then it comes to English players, where it becomes a question between, let's say, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who you already have in this draft and you can have him as a captaincy option, versus, let's say, Mbappe, who's going to be a captaincy option on the subsequent day on the 21st of June. So I kind of like the balance there in terms of one French player and one English player at least, despite them having really tough fixtures. So that's why we've gone for Mbappe. As far as Ronaldo, look, he simply just has a brilliant fixture. It's versus Turkey. You're probably going to expect that, let's say, Turkey will concede. What I will say maybe kindly about Turkey is that maybe their offense is decent right now, right? They have been scoring in a lot of consistent games. So maybe you can actually see it as an opportunity to not play Cancelo. I do think Cancelo is amazing for this match day potentially, but it's not like Portugal's defense are extremely well rated, right? When you look at it, for example, the market, it's clearly the case that Portugal is more rated for their offense than they're rated for their defense. Now, at the same time, obviously, Cancelo, you can argue to me, is an extremely attacking player, and I wouldn't dispute that at all. It's obviously a case of, who you want to target. In my opinion, Guardiola is just amazing for match day 2. So maybe you drop Trent Alexander-Arnold and you lose yourself a captaincy option for the 21st, or sorry, on the 20th, where you actually lose yourself a captaincy option. Unfortunately, you probably have to go for, I don't know, maybe let's say a Serbian option if you really want to go there and you have, let's say, a Serbian keeper or a Serbian defender, but it's obviously not exactly the best situation. So that's sort of my thoughts in terms of the captaincies. Kai Havertz obviously just a fantastic pick, rounding up the triple Germany. When it comes to the big teams in the tournament, when it comes to the teams that have already performed so far and done well, Havertz did brilliantly. I think one thing to say, obviously, yes, he was an early substitute, but that was a very unique game state, right? It was 10 versus 11. So basically, his job was done. There wasn't really any need to sort of exert more. It made sense for Fulkrug to be a sub for him. In a future match, I think that Fulkrug could very well be a substitute for Gundogan. If, for example, let's say the subsequent match, for example, is going to be a little bit tougher for Germany. So, when Germany play Hungary, for example, and maybe it's a little bit of a tougher game, maybe they haven't, for example, got such a huge advantage at halftime, it might be the case that you can see Havertz play more minutes, which I think is even better for the case of keeping Havertz. And obviously, if Gundogan comes off, then he's more than likely going to be the penalty taker once again as well. And that's a huge buff for Havertz and sort of our sort of perception of him as a pick. So I do like Havertz within the wildcard draft. So let's quickly move on to the limitless portion of the draft, right? This is going to have an unlimited price point. This is the whole point of the limitless draft. And, by going for a limitless, I think the idea of looking for both the wildcard and the limitless drafts is you can have a comparison, right? Have a look at what I've been able to spend with 100 million on the initial draft, and then look at the second draft and maybe ask yourself, what you can do with an unlimited budget and what the changes are. Because for someone who's about to decide their chip strategy, before you press that wildcard button or the limitless button, you basically want to have a look at, what is your theoretical Matchday 3 draft versus your Matchday 2 draft. And I think the point here with the limitless here is that I think you can go for definitely more talismans within the game, and you can still target a lot of bases, like for example triple Germany. You can definitely still target Belgium quite a fair bit, who actually have a really good game, and you can also once again triple up on Portugal, which is something that I wasn't really able to do within my previous draft because I wanted to capture some of the captaincies as well. The way this draft will work, of course, is targeting first of all the clean sheet odds from Croatia, which are brilliant. So that's why we've gone with Guardiola and Livakovic. I just think that Livakovic, he plays effectively the first game within this group stage, and so he's a very good pick to almost start with. And you're unlimited, right? So you have the best clean sheet odds. Why not take Livakovic, who's actually a pretty good shot stopper anyways? Guardiola, super attacking player, so definitely love his attacking positionings, and ultimately he's backed by great clean sheet odds this time around. As far as the German defense, the reason why I've gone for Rudiger is, a lot of people tend to get upset at a player after he's made a huge mistake, right? An own goal obviously is a huge mistake, but in the context of the game, it didn't really matter. Obviously for us fantasy players, it was a horrible mistake and brutal for me and my fantasy team for the Euros in this version of the championships. But Rudiger is obviously a great pick to go for still. He's obviously a key set piece threat for this team. I also do like Mittelstadt, right? If you want to just simply go for Mittelstadt and you think that Mittelstadt got into some great attacking positions, I would definitely not disagree with you. I think Mittelstadt's also a great pick, but Rudiger obviously seemed also fantastic for the ball recovery elements of the game. So if you're expecting once again that hopefully Germany can get a clean sheet, that you're looking at these center backs who are getting insane ball recovery numbers, Rudiger is definitely your guy. So I do like Rudiger a lot. Trent Alexander-Arnold is definitely someone that I'm going with. Once again, I think if Trent plays poorly versus Serbia, you can just simply replace him with someone like Kyle Walker, and I think that's fine. We'll also get to find out what is going on with Luke Shaw, whether he's actually able to maybe come on as a late substitute. Maybe he'll be confirmed to start for Matchday 2. If you want to move on to, let's say, someone like Luke Shaw, I mean, this spot is really just held for an English defender. I think if Trent continues to do well, I can't see why he wouldn't be able to continue starting within the midfield. And so I think for Matchday 2, it could be very interesting to have Trent Alexander-Arnold once again, despite it actually being Denmark as a fixture. What I will say, obviously, is that Denmark are probably actually a stronger defense than they are a stronger offense. And so I do still like, for example, an English defender within this context. As far as Castagna, I like him because obviously there's going to be some sort of doubts about De Kuyper and whether he continues to play. Thiax is back in the team. Vertonghen is back in the team training. So why not just go for Castagna, someone who I think is absolutely nailed within his position, playing as the right back for Belgium. So I do really like Castagna within this position. As far as the last defender, obviously a tried and trusted player known throughout all fantasy games, right? João Cancelo. So super attacking player, can play multiple positions as a fullback, and ultimately definitely going to be nailed for Portugal. I just love him, and João Cancelo. Someone that we usually struggle to get to because obviously for budget reasons, it's hard to kind of keep him within our drafts, but Cancelo it is. As far as the midfield, the only player that a lot of people might find is very strange that we're having here is Kvaratskhelia. But in my opinion, once again, he is the talisman of his team. He's actually one of the players that I think would be expected to do well in Matchday 2. We talked about how France have a pretty tough fixture, how England have a pretty tough fixture. I might not want to go, for example, for English midfielder. I still think that Kvaratskhelia can be still very interesting because the fixture that Georgia have is actually very good for Matchday 2. In my opinion, it's still better than the English fixture. And it's not like, for example, some of the other English midfielders have things like penalties to really compare with, let's say, Kvaratskhelia, right? So that's something that Kane has, but it's not something that the other English midfielders have. As far as, let's say, the other German midfielders, we're going with Musiala and Wirtz. Obviously, with Gundo potentially losing a little bit of that pen share. I'm not saying that pen share is definitely going towards Havertz 100%, but losing a little bit of pen share. And I also think that it really depends on the game state sometimes, right? Gundogan obviously played 90 minutes. That's brilliant. He actually had a fantastic game, in my opinion. Obviously, maybe deserved a little bit more within that match, considering how well Musiala, Wirtz, and Havertz outperformed him. But these are all still great picks. I still think Gundogan is definitely within the mix for Germany. I definitely have no issues with keeping Gundogan in my team, but Musiala and Wirtz is definitely the players I'd like to go with, given that you have an unlimited budget anyways. And Musiala was occupying some great positions, mostly because he was able to ball carry so well into great key spots. Wirtz, however, was obviously in great spots. I talked about how even in the sort of wildcard segment of the video, how Mittelstadt dropped a great cross towards Wirtz. He wasn't only, for example, just scoring a banger. He was occupying some great positions anyways himself, and that Mittelstadt cross and that miss where he sort of skied it over the bar is a good example of that. Bruno Fernandes and Kevin De Bruyne, nothing really to explain here, just amazing picks with amazing fixtures. And then actually in the forward position, a lot of people will probably, dispute this, right? Because I can kind of understand. Look, Havertz obviously had a great game last time out. Some other forwards as well simply have really good fixtures too. But in my opinion, once again, Mbappe and Kane are still just dominant picks, talismanic picks, and players that I probably, wouldn't really pass up the opportunity to sort of not have within my team anyways. A lot of people are going to probably still have one of Kane and Mbappe heading towards this segment of the sort of match day 2 stage of fantasy, particularly if they're not going to use a wild card. And a lot of people have Ronaldo. Why not cover all your bases? The only player you're really missing out here is Lukaku, and maybe you'll change your mind, right? You might want to go for Lukaku over Mbappe because for whatever reason, maybe Mbappe is maybe a little bit injured. Maybe we'll find out that Mbappe is not really fit and you can change that position. But I think the key thing to point out is when we talk about captaincies. So when we talk about captaincies, when we look at this draft, I think what I like about this draft is that it covers most of your bases in terms of captaincies, right? On the 19th of June, the players that you probably want to target are a German captaincy. So I think this is another good opportunity to go Musiala captain once again for the people who went for Musiala Wirtz captain the first time round. Then obviously in the second day of play, you have England as a captaincy option. Spain and Italy is a fixture that I'd probably ignore. Slovenia and Serbia you're going to ignore because you have an unlimited budget. So therefore, I would still go for Kane as a captaincy option. I think that's why you'd want to go for Kane. And then on the third day, it's actually, players like maybe, your Ukrainian forward, if you really want to go for that option over, let's say, your forwards here. Maybe Lewandowski is back for match day 2, or you're talking about, for example, a French option like Mbappe. And in my opinion, I would still probably go with Mbappe anyways, despite obviously, what we feel about, let's say, how tough the fixture might be for France. I still think Mbappe is someone who, when it comes to, let's say, goal scoring odds, goal scoring predictions, you're still going to have Mbappe at the top of the list, even though he has a really relatively tough fixture. So for me, Mbappe is still a brilliant option. Definitely something that I would still consider here. And then obviously in the final match day, you're really sort of looking at a Ronaldo captaincy to close things out. So that's pretty much how I would play this match day 2 draft Limitless. It's quite simple. It's quite sweet. Yes, of course, we still have a little bit of England despite the fixture being rather tough. And the same case with Mbappe for France here. But there's no reason to really ignore these sorts of players because they still are key. When it comes to match day 3, and if you plan to use your Limitless there, then of course you can actually look at, for example, going for more French players, maybe a Theo Hernandez, because you're expecting the Dutch team to put up much more of a fight in match day 2 compared to, let's say, what France have in match day 3. But we'll find out then, and we'll make our decisions then for match day 3. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I appreciate you guys for the support so far. The views have been amazing so far for the Euros, so I really have to thank you guys once again. If you enjoyed the video, do feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care and goodbye.